got our favorite Uncle Dries here today again. Good morning, Uncle Dries. We're here with you today to speak about rods and some aspects about the drilling industry. Welcome at our studio. Over to you.
Thank you, Randy. Today we're going to look at, as Randy said, rods, fishing tools, a little bit about the drill care that involves the drilling aspect. Now, we've talked about wet drilling before. Wet drilling is when you use chemicals, when you pump in more than 2.6 liters per minute into the hole. Dry drilling is only when you pump water for dust suppression. That's less than 2.6 per minute. That we see as dry drilling. Now back to the hammer lubrication again. If we do wet drilling, we double the amount of oil. We double it on the lubricator because the chemicals washes out the oil in the hammer. So please take care of that. If you do wet drilling, increase your lubrication times 2. Now we said the 6-inch hammer needs about 0.8 to 1 liter per hour. 8-inch will need more or less 2 for dry drilling. So increase it. It's going to cost you a bit on oil, but what does a hammer cost you? So that's the difference between wet and dry drilling. And again, we've mentioned it before, if we do wet drilling, those chemicals might disperse inside the hammer corrode. So if you finish with your hole, please blow the hammer out. Blow all the chemicals out, lubricate it again before you store it. I've seen hammers that was badly damaged inside because of corrosion by the chemicals. Now, another thing to remember, on the bit, the outside buttons, if you measure them crossover, that determines the diameter of your hole. And your outside buttons on the bit, on the circumference, those are the one that weighs more. That's on the concave bit. And also on the flat, but not as much. On the concave, the inner buttons are normally smaller than the outside buttons, because the outside buttons break the rock, the bit is hollow, so the inside bits gets less friction than the outside bits. That's why your flat on the gauge buttons is always bigger than on the inside, because that takes the most hammering. So if a bit is sent in with a flat on the inner button that exceeds the limit of 1/3 of the diameter, the outside one, even if it's all off, should have been bigger, because it takes more wear. On the convex bit, that's a bullnose that we said, it's round, so all buttons come in contact with the rock at the same time. Those buttons seem to wear the same, all of them. Buttons wear even. And something to bear in mind, the manufacturers of the bits have been very lenient to us. To create a bit with a QL60 shank that's bigger than 165, the 6-inch as we know it, you get a 203 8-inch and a 216 8.5-inch, also with a QL60, that allows us in the industry to fit that bit into a 6-inch hammer, so you don't have to buy the pricey 8-inch hammer. But for those bits, because the diameter of the bit and the diameter of the shank is such a big difference. The manufacturer doesn't give any claims on bit shanks. That's understandable. With that thin shank, you can get a QL80 shank, but then you need a QL80 hammer. You need to buy a QL80 hammer. So as I said, it's to help us in the industry, we in the industry, to save that money. So if you're careful, if you drill a QL60 shank with a 203 or 216 bit, take care. And be careful that you don't shank a bit. Sorry, if we look at rod care, we must remember on the rods you get a schedule 40 and you get a schedule 80. So if you order your rods, make sure you specify which one you want. The schedule 40 is a 6-inch wall thickness, and the schedule 80, 8.5 inch. Now we need to check the wear on the rods itself. Make sure if you're 2 millimeters down on the diameter of a schedule 40, take care, because then you sit with a 4 millimeter wall thickness. Be careful to take on too deep holes. You might twist, you might break a rod. Just take care and watch the thickness of your rods. The same on 80. On the 80 normally, what I have found is that you can pin and box one time when the threads are worn. You can put a new pin in a new box and use the rod again. So you can use that about 2 times the meters as with the schedule 40 rod. But lately it became expensive to pin and box, so be careful, take care of your threads. If you put a adapter over your rod thread, between the 2 surfaces, the 2 flat surfaces of the adapter and the rod, is normally between 10 and 15, closer to 15 millimeters if you just push it in without turning it in. The rest it turns in. It's a taper thread, so that tightens properly. If your gap between the faces gets too small, down to 5 millimeters, be careful. Change your rods. If you have a drill string of 100 meters or 200 meters into the hole, if we're going in, the bit is standing at the bottom. But if we're pulling out, you take the tools out, and your thread is worn, it may slip out. Your tools is going to end up in the hole. That's why we say please clean the rod threads and always keep the caps on, so you don't wear unnecessary. You get the maximum out of your rods. For the schedule 80, I've normally changed between 20 and 22,000 meters. I've changed a set of rods. And one thing to remember is rotate your rods. The carousel takes 8 rods. Don't go with the same one first every time. Change them around. Next time you load a rod, just turn the rod loader one on, one rod further. The same as we do with the chuck nut on the splines. You turn it so you don't use the same rod, same place every time. Even your spare rods on the trailer. Sometimes take your rods in the carousel out, put a new set into the carousel, because those we always use. On the trailer, depending on the depth of the hole. If your tools ends up in the hole, if you've lost tools, Now that's what we in the drilling industry call, you attend a funeral. If you can't get them out, they're underneath the ground, they're stuck. If you can't get them out, you lose them. Say your prayers, you forget about them. You can remember them, but it's something of the past. That's what we call, we've buried our tools. You've got fishing tools. The normal ones that we can purchase is the spear tap. It's a long straight tap, hardened with threads on the outside, that you can catch a rod. Let's say a box end or pin end broke off the rod. So I can enter the rod if I'm lucky and turn the spear tap slowly, catch the rods and then come up. That if my hammer and bit is not stuck. Then you get the bell tap. As it says, it's like a bell taper with the threads on the inside. You can turn it over the rod. That's the two that we normally use. Then we get the back hammer if I'm totally stuck. If you've lost rotation and you've lost traverse in your hole. If you've lost your rotation, then you've almost lost everything. Then you're close to having a funeral. Very, very close. And if we use a back hammer, open your air slowly. A back hammer we use because if you've got rotation, you can rotate fast, but you can try and come slowly up. But once you lost that, we use a back hammer to try and pull the rod string. But that back hammer hits hard. And you're not forcing down on your tools, you're putting stress on the welds. Because you're pulling up. Pull up until you've got rotation on your drill string. Then preferably take the back hammer off. Then you can come out by yourself because you've got your rotation back. We have made our own tools depending on the situation, what you want to catch. Take a pipe casing with a thick diameter, cut a holes in it, holes into the outside 3, and we put spring blades welded from the top inside. So if you push it over a hammer or a bit that you've lost, hopefully if you pull up, those blades, they're pointing upwards, they're going to catch on the flat, and it's going to help you to get your tools out. But a fishing tool is a fishing tool. We can sit for a weekend next to the fishing waters without catching anything. So they're there to help us. Let's have a look at the drill rig, a closer look at the drill rig that can cause us problems in drilling a hole. Guide collars, your play on your guide collars on the foot plate. You get your half moons that you insert into the foot plate. That's to prevent your foot plate to wear out. So if your half moons are worn, the back part of the half moons has normally got the splash plate on. It keeps your water and chips from going down and not up. So check your play on your inner collars. Between the outer collar is normally to clear the hammer, the inner collar to clear the rod. If we've got too much play there, if you blow a hole, even if it's got water in, well, especially when it's got water in, that water blows out between the rod and the collars, and it makes a mess all around. It's a slipping hazard for the people working in that area. So check that your guide collars is always maintained. If not, get new ones. Re-sleeve them. because that gives us unnecessary drifting, because we've got that play. Unnecessary wear on the tower, on the bearings in the drill head. The more movement we have in our drill string, the more friction we get in the tower and into the head. So check the tower once a week, check for cracks, check the foot plate, check the hangers that the drill head is hanging on, check them for cracks. So those are things that really take stress with the downfeed when we drill a hole. So please check that. Another thing that's very important, our air pipes that supply the air to the hammer is normally a rubber pipe, because it needs to bend, it needs to go up and down with the tower. After a while, few months, maybe a year, the inside of those pipes the rubber gets corroded because of the hot air, because of the chemicals we use, and that seems to break off the insides. If that enters the hammer that it's gonna do, that always breaks off. I've stripped plenty hammers that the whole backhead, the check valve, the top of the control tube, all the holes are blocked with that pieces of rubber. So remember, even if that pipe sits there and it looks as if it's doing nothing, it can corrode. It can block your hammer. You can get a breakdown. So please check on that, because I've seen it plenty times. Wear on head bearings. How do I check for wear on the head bearings? Very important. I can damage a drill head and it can cost me 3-4 times more if I don't notice the play on the bearings, or it's got play on the bearings. Just take if the drill string is out, take your head with a bull shaft, put a spanner, a drill spanner, onto the foot plate and press your head down. See if there's any play on the bull shaft. There shouldn't be any play. It is normally adjustable. It's got grub screws on the collar right around that you can take up that play. But let somebody do it that knows what he's doing. Otherwise you can lift it skew. It can harm the bearings. Half moons we've talked about in the foot plate. Dust bowls. Now, it's very highly recommendable that on the compressors, air filters and the engines, we put a dust bowl, because of the drilling conditions, we get a lot of dust. And you and me know, you look at the wind direction before you stop a rig on a hole. But as soon as you start drilling, the wind changes and it goes the other way. I don't know why, but that happens. And all that dust goes into your filters. You'll be surprised if you have a dust bowl on your filters to see how many dust you catch that doesn't enter the filter. In a dustly condition where you drill dust and the wind is blowing in the wrong direction, you can almost fill that dust bowl up in one hole, and that dust would have gone into the filter. So dust bowls, you can see them. They're made out of perspex, so you can see the level of the dust. Clean them out daily. I'd say weekly. What I have done, take the outer filter off. If I take the outer filter off, I can see if there was dust going through to the inner filter. Normally, if your filter just collected dust and it didn't let dust through, the inner filter is clean, so don't take it off. Then you've got a chance of getting dirt inside. So take your outer filter off and just tap it against the tire of the rig. Make sure no dust goes inside the filter. You'll be surprised to see how many dust comes out of that filter. So dust bowls, clean them daily. Outer filters, I'd say once a week at least. If the inner filter is in a good condition, don't interfere with that. Please don't interfere with that because you allow the chance to get some dirt in. Services on the rig. We all know what a rig costs. So I have serviced every 250 hours, do a complete service, oil changes, filter changes, new filters, not clean filters out, new filters. And look at your manufacturer's recommendations for services. Compressors nowadays are different than in the olden days. The services are more frequent. The bearing changes on the compressor is more frequent. Previously we ran for 12,000 hours before you had to do bearings on the compressor. Nowadays they recommend, some manufacturers recommend 4,000 hours. So be careful, look at your manufacturer's specifications and see what they want. I don't think we may have left something out, but if you got a question, ask. If I forgot something and I didn't mention it, please ask. If we do all this, then we should prevent funerals and many funerals. I've had a few of them throughout my life, and that's a costly thing. So take care, please take care, then you shouldn't have a problem.
Thank you, Uncle Dries. Like always, it's such a pleasure hearing all your wisdom. Keep well.
I forgot something, Randy, that I want to mention. On the fishing tools, we've got a magnet as well. And please, please, if you lost some tungsten buttons on a bit, don't go in with the next bit without removing those tungsten buttons, because you're gonna break the new bit's buttons off. If you broke any buttons, you can see on a bit that broke a gauge button. They normally break first. The one breaks, then the one next to it, then the one next to it, until there's nothing left. If I don't fish those tungsten tips out of the hole, I'm gonna break the next bit's buttons off. Please get yourselves a magnet. You get it, it screws onto the rod. You go down with a magnet, you can blow. It picks up 99% of that tungsten buttons. It sticks to the magnet. But please do that. Otherwise, we all know what a new drill bit costs. Prevent that. Please don't forget your magnet. Thank you.
That was the cherry on the cake. Thanks, Uncle Dries.